So anyway, this is Kari Lake. This is a real woman running for Senate, like U.S. Senate. What a great individual. She's endorsed by Donald Trump. She's going to be the actual border czar. She's actually going to do some real good for Arizona and for America. Let's go see what she has to say. She's going up against Ruben Gallego in this debate, and she's running both of them. Ruben Gallego is running to keep his seat. Kari Lake is running for the seat. Let's get right into this.
Who have voted against our needs and what's important for our safety. We are going to be hearing tonight from somebody who's undergone an extreme makeover, to quote an old TV show, somebody who has voted with the most radical Democrats in Washington, D.C. to tear open our borders that were delivered to him in a safe way, with President Trump securing our border, who has torn apart our economy and who has made our children and our lives less safe. And so tonight we're going to watch as somebody tries to reinvent himself, somebody who used to be a member of the Progressive Caucus, somebody who has destroyed the very congressional district that he has served for the past 10 years, where homelessness is on the rise. It's the fastest growing homeless population, where quality of life is diminished. We want to get back to the days where Arizona was affordable and safe. And when we put America first, we can do that. We need to put our country over our party. That's what we need to do, country over party, and that's what America First is all about. Unfortunately, for the man I'm standing on the stage with tonight, he took an oath to protect us from enemies, foreign and domestic, and we've seen enemies coming across our border. We've had 20 million people pour across our border. Our border is wide open. Murderers have come in, criminals have come in, and terrorists have come in. I want to go to Washington, D.C. and help President Trump secure the border, bring back that strong Trump economy, make it so that we can have the American dream once again for our young people who feel that they don't have access to the American dream. I'm looking forward to the debate tonight, and I thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. And we are going to start with the border this evening. And as this is an intricate issue, we have separated this topic into two categories: border security and immigration reform. Mr. Gallego, you were one of the earliest and most emphatic critics of a border wall. Has your perspective changed on that? How much of a role does a border wall need to play in an overall security package? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I think a border wall is important to a security package, but it also has to be coupled with technology, manpower, and then laws that come behind that. So this is why it was important that that the border security compromise bill passed, because it had a lot of those elements. And I have voted for border walls in the past, and actually hundreds of miles with the border walls, because where appropriate, with the proper manpower and staffing, it does work. What doesn't work is when you put a border wall without the manpower and without the actual laws that you need to implement behind it, because it doesn't end up being of any use and it's just costing us more money. So this is why we focus on things such as the border security bill, right? Something that was extremely important. It was a compromise between the most conservative Republicans and Democrats to make sure that we brought some effort. This is something that the Border Patrol wanted and endorsed. It would have brought thousands of Border Patrol agents, thousands of asylum judges, thousands of ICE agents, as well as the technology that we needed at our ports of entries. And this is stuff that I heard from our Border Patrol union. I heard from the mayors that I've visited down there, our county officials, and they needed this and they wanted this. This is why it was very, very sad that Kari Lake came out and was against that bill, even after it was carved off between the foreign policy aid and just solely standing. She was still against it, not because there was a better option, but because she needs it. She needs this to be a border problem, because that solution would have brought a lot of the problems that we have under control. And look, from day one, I've worked in a bipartisan manner when it comes to this. One of the first things that I did when I got to Congress, I worked with Congresswoman Martha McSally, a Republican from Southern Arizona, to get veterans to join Border Patrol. Even recently, I signed on to a bill, the only Democrat signed to a bill, Representative Crenshaw of Texas, to get more federal law enforcement, make it easier for them to actually join Border Patrol, something that has been very difficult and something that the Border Patrol agents themselves told me they wanted to be able to do.
Thank you. Mrs. Lake, 2 minutes. I'm going to give you the 2 minutes, a full 2 minutes here, to talk about the border wall, and can it upstand and withhold without adding extra security and billions on technology?
I just jotted down Ruben's exact quote. He called it the dumb, stupid border wall. He wrote an op-ed that said why we should never build Trump's wall ever. So we're getting the extreme makeover version of Ruben tonight. Ruben has voted against border security every step of the way. Remember, I covered the state for 27 years. I was in your home, and all that time we watched as career politicians said they were going to secure the border and give us border security, and they never did until President Trump came along and actually secured the border, but he had to do it with one hand tied behind his back because people like my opponent were fighting him every step of the way, would not give a penny for that border wall. That border wall keeps us safe. We've seen it here in Arizona because we've seen those areas where the border wall is there and people aren't coming through. Where there are gaps in it, people are pouring through. And Ruben Gallego has supported every step of the way Kamala Harris, the border czar, and Joe Biden's open border policy, which has ushered in 20 million people illegally, including more than 400,000 convicted criminals, and they've done nothing to secure the border. The only piece of legislation that Mr. Gallego has put forth was not about border security. It was about removing the word illegal alien from anything in the federal government paperwork. He's more worried about semantics than our security. And right now, we know that we have terrorists that are coming through. We're worried about a potential terrorist attack on our home soil. We want to be able to go for a jog in the morning like Lake and Riley did and not have to worry about being killed, raped, and murdered. And we're not safe because of the people that have come in. Ruben Gallego has empowered the cartels. I want to finish the border wall. On day one, my first piece of legislation will be to fully fund and expedite the construction of the border wall. It's unfortunate we already paid for the construction materials to do that, but Ruben Gallego and Kamala Harris they sold that $325 million rather of border material for pennies on the dollar. They gave it away. We could have had that wall finished.
Mrs. Lake, in addition to finishing the wall, do you add security and technology? Do you spend on that as well?
Absolutely. I don't think we can do enough to secure our border. It is the most important issue facing Arizonans and facing our whole country. Every state is a border state right now because of this man's policies, this man's votes, which have been 100% open border. He sided with the cartels every step of the way and against the American people. And you and I are suffering because of it.
Thank you, Mrs. Lake. Mr. Gallego,
yeah, I'd like
a minute to respond.
Yes.
And do you support open borders?
Absolutely not. I do not support open borders. A country that doesn't have a border they control is not a country. I absolutely agree with that. And to say that, I've been very proud of making sure that in my time in Congress, I have voted and brought thousands of Border Patrol agents to Arizona, have voted and funded hundreds of miles of border walls where needed, where our experts wanted it. This is why I'm supportive of the border enforcement bill, the compromise bill that was supported by Border Patrol. And Kari Lake, for still no reason why she can explain it, she can't explain it why she was against that bill. Now, this is why we have more support from border mayors than she does. As a matter of fact, there's one border mayor that started with her on the campaign, met with her in front of the border wall with her campaign sign, and now is supporting us because he knows that we're not just talk, we're not just rhetoric. We're here to bring the resources to actually control the border and not just use it as a talking point, which is what Kari Lake does.
Mrs. Lake, a minute to respond.
He voted against President Trump's national emergency on the border. He said the border's not that big of a deal in Arizona when he was talking to people who were donating money to his campaign and said he's not an expert on the border. We need somebody who understands the threat on the border, and I do. And President Trump does, and on day one, we're going to get busy undoing the damage caused by Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Ruben Gallego, who's voted with them 100% of the time. Can you imagine voting with the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden 100% of the time, especially when it comes to the border? You know, this isn't just about an open border. We've got 20 million people pouring in. They're taking jobs, they're taking housing. This is why nobody can afford housing anymore, because we're having to compete with people who've come in illegally. I am completely opposed to an open border. I am 100% for legal immigration. My mother-in-law came here legally, and all of the incredible immigrants of this country who came here legally are horrified by the votes that my opponent has taken. They're horrified by what Kamala Harris has done. And by the way, that piece of legislation, thank you for reminding me, I am not for it And it's because it would codify into law 5,000 people every day coming in illegally. That means 5,000 people every day would be pouring across our border illegally. That law did nothing to stop child sex trafficking. 350,000 children have been trafficked across our border since Ruben Gallego and Kamala Harris opened up that border. 350,000, and they've lost track of them.
Mrs. Fleck, let's move to a specific question, please, on that topic. Are there any elements of that bipartisan border bill you would have supported?
Actually not, because it was not done properly. Okay. Listen, here's what happens in Washington, D.C. These guys meet in back rooms. They have an idea. They say, let's put a border deal together. Let's call it the Safe Border Act, whatever they call it, because they always call it something, and it's really usually the opposite. Then they throw a bunch of other stuff in there, and they never get to it. And the problem with this piece of legislation that I had a real problem with, Steve, was that they attached it to $115 billion in foreign money and more money, our money, Arizona's money, going overseas to kill people. And when they couldn't get this passed because there was no bipartisan support, they may have had 3 different people writing it and pushing this, but there was no bipartisan support. 3 people supporting it. The senators were not bipartisan behind it, and in the House they weren't supporting it either. And the people weren't supporting it. So what they did is they separated it out, and Ruben Gallego voted to send another $60 billion to Ukraine. And after he made that vote, he sashayed around the floor of Congress, waving a Ukrainian flag. I want to ask the veterans out there, can you ever imagine standing on the floor of Congress, standing anywhere, and waving the flag of another country? That is what this gentleman did. He sold us out. He sold us out to Ukraine. He spent $260 billion. He's voted for every penny of that, but he would not help President Trump build the border wall. Even when President Trump said to the Democrats, I want to make a deal when it comes to DACA. I want to make a deal when it comes to DACA. Let's make them citizens in exchange for helping me come up with money to build the border wall. And Ruben Gallego and the Democrats said no. They're using these DACA recipients as political pawns. I find that to be disgusting, Ruben. Why are you using them as pawns? Why wouldn't you make a deal with President Trump?